My name is Rachel Monroe Callahan. I'm 39, and I wasn't supposed to see that Instagram post. I was sipping cold brew in my robe, scrolling half awake through dog videos and meal prep hacks, when Amanda's story lit up my screen. A looping boomerang. Champagne flutes clinking, sunlight dancing off the bow of the June Bellier yacht. The caption read, "Legacy Week loading with a glitter emoji." Everyone was there. Except me. No text. No invite. Not even a sorry, it filled up fast. Have you ever realized you were erased from something you helped build? Drop a comment if family politics ever made you feel like an outsider in your own life. Because what happened next made me question everything I thought I understood about loyalty and silence. Let me back up, just a little. So, you understand why being left off that guest list hit harder than I wanted to admit. The coffee sat on the counter untouched, turning from hot to indifferent. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering mid-scroll like I was waiting for the post to unexist. But there it was. A glossy shot of Amanda's favorite sunglasses perched on a yacht railing, the caption practically humming with entitlement. Legacy Week loading number family tradition. I clicked into it. Looping boomerangs of champagne flutes clinking. Breezy linen shirts, boat shoes, tan smiles. My husband Dan's cousin Charlotte dancing with someone's toddler on the deck of the June Belle. Our yacht. The one I bought. The one I named. No one had said a word. I checked my inbox. Nothing. No. Hope you can make it this year. No passive-aggressive group text. Not even the usual paperless post that Amanda loved to send at 6 a.m., so it looked thoughtful. I checked again. Group chat. Callahan Legacy Circle. Still archived. Still muted. Still a thread I'd been removed from 2 years ago, after Amanda said I was overcorrecting the seating chart at a dinner. Dan had said it was a glitch. He always says it's a glitch. I locked the screen and set the phone down face down. The granite countertop was cool under my fingertips, like a grounding stone. The June Belle. I remembered the day we christened her. Amanda insisted on white florals and hired a photographer. I paid the full invoice and signed the ownership papers with a pen I'd brought from my home office. Dan had smiled and said it was just easier for tax purposes if the paperwork listed both our names. Now the same family who toasted me that night was toasting without me. Again. I told myself I wasn't surprised. But surprised isn't always a scream. Sometimes, it's a hollow thud in your chest that lands heavier than you expected. The coffee had gone cold. I picked up my phone again just to check something. Amanda's assistant, Harper, had posted her own story. A sneak peek at the cabin assignments. Beautiful script on parchment cards, each tucked neatly into white envelopes. The camera panned across the table, then froze accidentally, I'm sure on one envelope, where a name had been scratched out in thick black ink. It took 2 glances to realize what it said. Rachel M. cancelled. Next to it, Harper Rosewood. Confirmed. He blinked. There it was. Not an oversight. Not a miscommunication. Just a name quietly removed. Mine. The sink gurgled faintly behind me, like it was trying to fill the silence. I opened the Notes app on my phone and started typing. Date, June Doe. Time, 8:17 a.m. Event, exclusion confirmed. Replaced by Amanda's assistant. No notice given. No message. Feeling, not shocked. Just. Finally done pretending. I saved it to a locked folder labeled Receipts and Resilience. Then I opened my email and searched. The June Belle ownership. It popped up immediately. Chuck's message from last year. Confirmed. Rachel Monroe Callahan, co-owner. Equal rights. Not revocable without consent. I reread it 3 times. Then I hit print. The printer in the study coughed to life as if startled. I watched the page slide out slowly, the text crisp and final. This wasn't about a boat. It wasn't even about Amanda. It was about the weight of accumulated erasure. Every brunch I'd been left off. Every email she forgot to copy me on. Every time she called me Danny's little marketing girl, like I hadn't built a company that paid for the very wine she sipped. I slipped the paper into a file folder and sealed it. Then I pressed both palms flat on the counter and exhaled. Stillness. That's what it felt like. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Just the quiet arrival of a truth that had been circling for years. They were never going to give me a seat at that table. And I'd spent years bringing my own chair, thinking one day someone might scoot over and say, "We saved you a spot." I turned off the coffee machine. Tomorrow, I'd buy a new folder. A bigger one. And maybe, just maybe, I'd stop waiting to be invited. Dan got home just after 6. I heard the creak of the front door, the familiar clink of keys in the bowl by the entry table. He always tossed them there like he was done for the day, like nothing outside those walls followed him in. He didn't call out. Just headed straight for the fridge. I stayed in the kitchen, quiet, pretending to check an email that didn't matter. He pulled out a beer and leaned against the counter like it was any other Thursday. I glanced up and asked, as lightly as I could manage, "So, did you know your family's planning another yacht trip?" He looked up from his phone, blinked once like I'd just told him the weather report. "Yeah," he said. "I think Mom mentioned it last week. They're still finalizing the list." Finalizing. That word scratched at something just under my skin. I tilted my head, like I was asking out of genuine curiosity. "Am I on the list?" Dan set his phone down, just for a second. "Of course. Why wouldn't you be?" I smiled just enough to keep it from tipping into something harder. "No reason," I said. "Just checking." He nodded and went back to scrolling, probably through stocks or fantasy football, or whatever distraction kept him comfortably distant. He didn't ask why I was asking. He didn't look concerned. And I didn't push. After dinner, I washed the dishes by hand. He offered to help, but only half-heartedly. I said I had it. There's something about scrubbing plates in silence that makes your thoughts louder. The hum of the faucet. The occasional clink of ceramic. It gives everything else space to rise. I dried the last glass and set it gently in the rack. Then I wiped my hands and stood there for a moment, letting the steam drift around my face like a fog I wasn't ready to clear. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan. The blades spun slow and steady like time itself was dragging its feet. Dan was already half asleep beside me, his back turned toward the window. My mind replayed the post, the champagne flutes, the golden filter Amanda loved to use. They were already on the water, toasting to family, to tradition, to legacies I apparently didn't fit into. And it wasn't just the yacht. It was the baby shower I found out about 2 days late. The group photo at Dan's cousin's wedding where I was cropped out at the shoulder. The brunch invite that somehow skipped my inbox but made it to every other +1 in the family. I wasn't imagining it. And I wasn't angry, not in the way you'd expect. It was something quieter. Like grief, but without a body to bury. I pulled my journal from the drawer, opened to a blank page, and wrote one sentence. Watch. Don't react yet. I stared at it for a long time. Then I closed the book and turned off the light. End of callers. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Amanda. Not even a message, really. A grenade wrapped in pleasantries. Hey, Rachel. Just realizing we may have missed reserving a spot for you on the yacht. Totally my oversight. Trip filled up quicker than expected this year. Hope we can catch up after. That emoji. That breezy tone. Like it was a scheduling conflict and not a calculated erasure. There was no offer to fix it. No. Let me call the charter and see what we can do. Action. Just a chirpy little brush off, soaked in passive apologies and fake warmth. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't trust my fingers not to betray the composure I was clinging to. Instead, I closed the message, got dressed, and walked out to the kitchen. The sky outside was soft with cloudlight, the kind of gray that makes everything feel like a waiting room. My plan had been to go to the farmer's market. Instead, I just sat at the counter, still in jeans and a sweater, sipping yesterday's coffee reheated in the microwave. Mid-morning, a new email pinged into my inbox. Subject: cancellation confirmation. The June bell. Cabin release successfully processed. I opened it. The request had been submitted 3 days ago. Name of the requester: Amanda Callahan. Rosewood. I read it twice, then again. Not a mistake. Not a timing issue. Intentional. I forwarded the email to myself, then printed it. 1 copy. Clean. I slid it into a folder in the bottom drawer of my Descone I usually used for taxes and contracts. I pulled out a label maker and typed 3 words: receipts and resilience. Then I pressed print, peeled the label, and stuck it to the folder. Dan came home later that night, kissed my cheek like nothing had shifted in the air. He went to the den and turned on the game. I stood in the hallway, holding that folder like it weighed more than paper. Because it wasn't just a cancellation. It was confirmation. They weren't just leaving me off the boat. They were writing me out of the story. And this time, I wasn't going to pretend I didn't notice. Not anymore. I didn't hear from Dan all day. Not a, "How's your morning?" Not a check-in. Nothing. And maybe that was normal for us now, quiet days sliding past each other. But today, it landed different. I stood by the kitchen window, holding a mug I hadn't refilled, staring out at the neighbor's dog chasing leaves like they were a game that made sense. My phone buzzed just as I turned to rinse the mug. Amanda. The preview line flashed on screen. Hey Rach. So sorry about the mix-up. I didn't want to open it. But I did. Hey Rach. Just realized we might have missed reserving your spot on the yacht. Totally slipped through the cracks. Things filled up so fast this year. I'll catch you when we're back. That emoji again. That smirking little punctuation mark she used when she wanted to pretend something cruel was casual. I stared at the message long enough for the screen to go dark. Then I locked it and placed the phone face down on the counter. There it was. Her mistake, dressed up like a scheduling error. No mention of the cancellation email. No reference to the fact that my name had been formally removed 3 days ago. Just a breezy little excuse and a hope that I'd swallow it. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because anything I said would feel like a lie. Like I was still playing the game. Instead, I walked to my home office. I opened the file drawer and pulled out the folder now labeled Receipts and Resilience. I slipped Amanda's message in as a screenshot, printed and time-stamped. Then I sat at my desk and stared at it for a long moment. This wasn't about forgetting. It was about removing. Replacing. I pulled open my laptop and clicked into my email. A new message blinked at the top of the inbox. Subject: Charter Update. Cancellation processed. I already knew what it was. Still, I opened it. Dear Miss Monroe Callahan, your cabin cancellation has been finalized per the request submitted on the 3rd of June by Amanda Callahan Rosewood. Thank you, and enjoy your summer. There was no mistake. She had filed the cancellation days before sending her apology. Not after. Not when things filled up fast. But before. My stomach didn't flip. My hands didn't shake. What I felt was worse. Stillness. Like a sheet of ice had slid over something that used to move. I printed the email. Slipped it into the folder. 3 pages now. All typed. All dated. None of it spoken aloud. A folder of proof I hadn't been asking for but clearly needed. I thought about texting Dan. But what would I say? Hey, your sister lied. Did you know she filed a cancellation for me? Why didn't you ask? No question I could send would get an answer that felt clean. I closed the laptop and leaned back. A photo caught my eye framed on the bookshelf beside me. Dan and me at the launch party for my online platform 3 years ago. I was holding the mic, mid-laugh, in a navy blazer that didn't quite fit. He was behind me, smiling, but his hands were in his pockets. Even then, I stood up and turned the frame face down. It didn't mean I didn't love him. It just meant I was done using memories to justify the present. Later that night, I found him in the den again. Tay flickering. Bear in hunt. the glow of ESPN casting moving shadows across his face. I waited until a commercial to say it. Amanda texted me. He didn't look away from the screen. Oh yeah? What'd she say? That the trip filled up faster than expected. My spot was accidentally left out. He nodded. Yeah, I heard it was hectic this year. I paused. Watched his face for any flicker of doubt. But all I saw was comfort. Not with me. With the version of the story that kept the peace. She canceled my cabin 3 days ago, Dan. I got the email confirmation today. From the charter company. His eyes dropped for just a second. Then he took a sip and said, maybe she thought plans had changed. She replaced me with her assistant. He didn't argue. Didn't defend. He just stayed quiet. And in that silence, I heard everything he wasn't saying. That I was easier to sacrifice than to confront. That his loyalty bent where it was safest. I stood there for another moment, waiting to feel angry. But all I felt was distance. Wider than the yacht. Deeper than blood. I turned and walked out of the room, not slamming the door, not saying another word. Back upstairs, I reopened the folder. 3 pieces of paper. Soon, there would be more. Because now I wasn't just noticing. I was recording. And eventually, even the quiet becomes too loud to ignore. The next morning, I couldn't focus. Not on email. Not on breakfast. Not even on the to-do list I normally found comfort in crossing off. Everything felt muted. I sat at my desk, the coffee I'd poured now lukewarm and untouched, and opened the folder again. The manila one with the fresh labels still curling at the corners. Receipts and resilience. 3 pages, neatly printed. Amanda's text. The charter company's cancellation notice. The cabin list with my name blacked out. It was enough. Enough to know I wasn't imagining it. Enough to stop gaslighting myself. But somehow, it didn't feel like enough. I opened my bottom drawer. Tucked inside was a much older file, the kind of file you forget about until you need to remember who you were before someone else tried to rewrite it. Inside were documents from the day we bought the yacht. Invoice. Wire transfers. The LLC registration I filed. My name. Not Dan's, not Amanda's, mine. The pages were creased from being folded too tightly in my bag the day I walked them into the bank. I pulled them out, laid them flat on my desk, and smoothed each one with the palm of my hand. That yacht. The June Belle wasn't just a boat. It was 5 years of 3 a.m. nights. Of saying no to new shoes, to vacations, to things I couldn't afford while building something from scratch. Back then, I ran deliveries myself when drivers bailed. I taught webinars in secondhand blazers, I steamed in gas station bathrooms. I pitched investors who smiled at my numbers but said I lacked aggressive presence, which was code for something they didn't have the courage to say out loud. Still, I kept showing up. When my company finally turned a profit, real profit, not just scraping by, I didn't buy a purse or a car. I bought that yacht. Quietly. I remember sitting in the backseat of an Uber, holding the cashier's check, my hands steady in a way that surprised me. It wasn't just a transaction. It was proof. Proof that I didn't need to be invited to a seat, I could buy the whole damn deck. And yet, when the paperwork was finalized, the lawyer suggested adding Dan's name. He said it would be easier for taxes, for future trusts. I said yes. Back then, I thought that was what marriage meant, shared everything. Now I realized I had shared my ownership. But no one shared the credit. Amanda called it the Family Yacht every time she spoke about it in public. Such a beautiful vessel to carry the Callahan legacy, she'd said at that fundraiser. Smiling into the microphone like she had any part in it beyond posing for photo ops and choosing the eucalyptus centerpieces. The memory made my stomach tighten. Not from rage. From clarity. This wasn't about a missed trip. It was about years of silent "it's me" being cropped out of every version of the story that Amanda controlled. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the lake shimmered under a wide, pale sky. I remembered the first summer on the boat. Amanda had insisted on a white dress code for brunch. She sat at the head of the teak dining table, assigning seats like it was her wedding. She placed me next to the engine room door. Better lighting for photos, she claimed. Dan didn't say anything. That should have been my first clue. I told myself it didn't matter. That what mattered was knowing what I had built. But if no one else acknowledged it, did it still count? I pulled out my phone and opened the gallery. Scrolled back to that launch summer. Found a picture of Amanda standing with her arms outstretched on the bow, smiling wide while holding a mimosa. My sunglasses were on the table behind her. My hand was half visible in the bottom corner. The caption read, "Callahan Women Building Legacy by Water." She didn't tag me. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then, quietly, I saved it into a new album labeled Erased. Because maybe keeping record was the only way to unerase yourself. Downstairs, the house was still. No sound from Dan. No messages from Amanda. I wasn't expecting any. I walked back to my desk, picked up the old ownership documents, and slid them into the folder with the rest. This wasn't just paperwork now. It was the truth. And I was done pretending it was just a boat. That night, Dan got home late. Not working late. Just delayed. He came in through the back door like always, carrying the same soft smell of aftershave and lake air. But something about him felt off. Like he was trying too hard to look normal. "Hey," he said, dropping his keys in the ceramic bowl I made during a failed pottery phase. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek barely there, then opened the fridge. I waited. He pulled out a LaCroix, cracked it open, and leaned against the counter. "New questions?" "No." "How was your day?" No mention of Amanda or the boat. Just quiet, sipping, and scrolling. Finally, I spoke. "So, got any updates on Yacht Week?" He glanced up, paused, then looked back at his phone. "Not really. Amanda said things are still kind of fluid, cabin reshuffling or something." A small pulse went off behind my right eye. I pressed my tongue against the roof of my mouth. I'd already seen the cabin list. I already knew Amanda canceled me before even sending the family invite. "Still," I asked, softly, "did you know she'd pulled our name from the charter?" He blinked. Just once. But it was enough. Then came the sigh. The one that always meant, "Don't make this a thing, Rachel." "I mean, I figured something was going on when she asked about rescheduling your webinar," he said. "She said it overlapped with the trip, so I assumed you knew. I didn't want to stress you out." There it was. That subtle dance Dan always did between omission and innocence. A careful phrasing that made it sound like his silence was a favor. "She didn't ask about my webinar, Dan. She told me I needed to move it, and I said no, that was 2 weeks ago." He didn't respond right away. Just stared into the can, like maybe the answer was at the bottom of his drink. Then he shrugged. Maybe it was just a mix-up. A mix-up. 3 canceled guest cabins. My name removed from the master charter. A perfectly timed apology text. And he called it a mix-up. I didn't yell. Didn't cray. I just walked over to the drawer where I'd tucked the folder. The one labeled Receipts and Resilience. I didn't pull it out. Just rested my hand on it. "You know," I said, voice quiet, "when we bought that boat, I put the down payment in cash, from my savings. You said we'd square it later." Dan looked at me then. His eyes softened, confused. "I thought we did. Didn't we use joint money after the refinancing?" "No, Dan. We didn't. You offered." I declined. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. A long silence stretched between us. That's when I realized he didn't remember. Not the payment. Not the fight we had after. Not the day I drove across state lines to file the LLC myself because I couldn't get a meeting on short notice. To him, the yacht had always just been there. Like the lake. Like the family name. But for me, it was earned. And now it was erased. "I'm not mad," I said, though I wasn't sure if that was true. I need to know where you stand in all this. Because it feels like I'm standing alone." Dan set down his drink. rubbed the back of his neck, then gave the answer I'd heard too many times before. Can we just not blow this up right now? And there it was, our marriage in one sentence. A long history of not blowing things up, of sweeping and shrinking and smiling through gritted teeth. I walked over to the patio door and slid it open. Cool lake air drifted in, carrying the scent of pine and the distant hum of cicadas. The moon was starting to rise over the water. Its reflection rippled, distorted, but still whole. I stayed there for a while, not saying anything, not expecting anything, just breathing in the silence and trying to decide if I could keep pretending this was enough. Behind me, I heard Dan's footsteps retreat down the hall. He didn't say goodnight, and I didn't say anything either. I didn't plan to go down to the marina that morning. But sleep hadn't come easy the night before. Dan had left early for a board thing. I didn't ask what. I just needed air. Or distance. Or both. So I drove. The sun was barely up, the lake still wrapped in mist. Birdsong floated through the windows as I pulled into the small gravel lot behind the main dock entrance. The place was quiet, a sleepy kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. I parked under the shade of a maple and slipped on my sunglasses. The good pair. Not for style. For armor. My sandals clicked against the wooden planks as I walked along the marina, past polished white hulls and bobbing fenders. I stayed on the outer path, the one slightly hidden behind the landscaping. Didn't want to be seen. Not yet. That's when I heard them. Laughter. High, fitzy, confident. I slowed, letting the wind carry their words. Amanda was holding court as usual. Standing on the back deck of the Calla Lily, barefoot with a flute of champagne in hand, hair curled just enough to look effortless. Beside her were three women I recognized vaguely from fundraisers and glossy family weddings. Honestly, one of them was saying, "I always thought Rachel was more of a corporate type. Doesn't really vibe with lake life, you know?" Amanda laughed. A soft, dismissive sound. "She tries, but she's very schedule forward." That got another laugh. Then came the kicker. She once brought her planner to a paddleboard brunch. I wish I were joking. I stopped breathing. They weren't even being cruel. Just casual. Like I was a punchline too tired to be offensive. "Dan's so chill," another added. "Honestly, it's probably why they work. He balances her out." Amanda sipped her drink, eyes scanning the horizon. "Well, for now." That's when I turned away. Not fast. Not dramatically. Just enough. I kept walking, around the bend where the marina curves near the private slips. A pelican drifted nearby, unfazed. Somewhere, a yacht's radio hummed soft country music. And I just stood there. Hands at my sides, shoulders still. Trying to swallow down the lump rising in my throat. It wasn't what they said. It was how true it all sounded coming from their mouths. Like a version of me had been passed around enough to become familiar. Stripped of context. Shaved down to one-liners. Rachel the try-hard. Rachel the scheduler. Rachel the outsider in her own marriage. I looked down at the ripples dancing below the dock. The water shimmered with morning light, pretending everything was fine. And for a second, I hated how peaceful it looked. How indifferent. A memory bubbled up. The first summer Dan brought me here. How I'd triple-checked the cooler, worried I didn't pack the right wine. How Amanda had complimented my sandals but then whispered to her friend, "A bit city, right?" I had smiled then. I had smiled so much. Because back then, I thought I just had to try harder. That eventually, I'd be enough. My hands curled into fists. Then relaxed. I reached into my tote and pulled out my phone. Snapped a quick photo of the dock, angled, quiet, meaningless to anyone else. But to me, it marked something. I wasn't invisible. I was watching. And I was done pretending that silence meant dignity. I turned and walked back toward the parking lot. Sunglasses still on. Shoulders straight. As I passed a cluster of kayaks, a teenage dockhand nodded politely. "Morning, ma'am." "Morning," I replied. And for the first time in a long while, my voice didn't tremble. Not even a little. The envelope was thick. Too thick to be casual. It sat in the stack of mail Dan had tossed onto the counter that morning, right on top of a landscaping invoice and some circulars. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a check I'd mailed to myself from the business account. But the creamy cardstock caught my eye. Heavyweight. Embossed. Edges gilded in silver. And the calligraphy. Not printed. Hand done. It was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Daniel Callahan. No middle name. No mention of me as a separate person. Just his name. With a phantom wife attached. I knew that kind of stationery. It was the kind Amanda picked for events that needed to look effortless but cost 5 figures. I slipped a finger under the seal. Inside was a trifold invite, tied with a thin silk ribbon. A watercolor of the lake took up the top half, delicate, precise, almost too perfect. Then I read the header. The Callahan Rosewood Summer Celebration. A toast to generations. My stomach dropped. I scanned the names. Amanda and Jason Rosewood, listed as hosts. Dan. Tucked politely under family. Guests of honor included half the people I'd seen laughing on the marina that morning. There was no RSVP for me. No note. No dress code card, which Amanda always added, for clarity. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife, I flipped the card over. Printed in smaller script along the bottom. In the spirit of intimate connection, we ask that only those named on the envelope attend. Thank you for understanding. I stared at the words. Read them again. Then again. Not +1. Not regretfully omitted. Just excluded. I leaned on the counter, my hand gripping the edge so tightly my knuckles went pale. The fridge hummed behind me. Outside, birds chirped like nothing was wrong. I wasn't crying. Not yet. But something inside me shifted. I walked into the living room and set the invite down on the coffee table, perfectly centered. It looked almost ceremonial. Like it belonged in a museum exhibit titled, "The Moment a Woman Disappeared from Her Own Life." Dan came home an hour later. He looked tired. Loosened his tie the second he stepped through the door. Saw me on the couch. Then noticed the invite. He paused. Just a second too long. "Oh," he said, voice too light. "You found it." All meh. I didn't speak. Just tilted my head slightly. He cleared his throat and sat on the edge of the ottoman across from me. "I meant to talk to you about this." Still, I said nothing. "I didn't plan the guest list, Rachel. You know how Amanda gets with these things. She gets to decide who counts as family?" He flinched. That tiny wince in his jaw that always came when truth got too close. "She's trying to make it a certain kind of event. Smaller, nostalgic." Nostalgic for what? A time before I existed? His eyes softened, but he didn't deny it. Didn't say I'd been added late or that my name had been left off by mistake. Because it wasn't. It wasn't a mistake. "I don't want to fight about this," he murmured. "Let's just—" "I'm not fighting," I interrupted. "I'm finally not fighting." He blinked. I stood slowly, walked to the kitchen, and opened the junk drawer. Pulled out a post-it note. Wrote one word. Received. Then I walked back, stuck it to the front of the invite, and left it on the table. Dan didn't follow me upstairs. He didn't say anything else. And I didn't cry. Instead, I lay on our bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slow circles above me. I wasn't hurt. Not in the way they probably hoped. I was awake. And something told me. They were going to wish they hadn't counted me out so soon. I didn't have a plan. Not really. But when the morning of the event came, I woke up calm. Still. Like the decision had been made in my bones while I slept. The lake was glass. Not a ripple. A breeze moved through the trees like breath. Don had already left. New note. New text. Just a half-empty mug in the sink, and the faintest trace of his cologne near the front door. I stood in our bedroom for a long time, robe wrapped around me, staring at the closet. What do you wear to a celebration you weren't invited to? I picked a linen jumpsuit. Ivory. Clean. Structured but soft. It wasn't flashy, but it fit me like memory. Like I'd grown into it. I clipped on a pair of gold earrings gifts from my mom, back when she still sent cards with little hearts in the corners. I smoothed my hair into a low twist. Minimal makeup. No perfume, just one drop of sandalwood oil behind each ear. Subtle, but sharp. Like walking into a room and letting the air shift around you without ever saying your name. I parked 3 blocks from the yacht club. Walked the rest. Every step felt like re-entry. Like I was stepping back into a story someone had tried to write without me. The entrance was draped in florals. Soft pink roses, white hydrangeas, gold-painted eucalyptus. Amanda's brand, top to bottom. A valet moved to intercept me. I gave him a nod so neutral it stopped him mid-step. He blinked, then stepped aside. Inside, laughter floated like glitter. The clink of glasses, the scrape of boat shoes on dockwood. The sound of a playlist that probably had its own event coordinator. I kept walking. Slow. Deliberate. People turned. Some smiled, clearly unsure if I belonged. Others gave me that polite nod-smile combo that says, I think I know you, but I'm not sure how. And then I saw her. Amanda. Center circle. Holding a coupe of champagne like it was an accessory. Wearing one of those backless designer dresses in a color so pale it screamed expensive skin only. Her laugh paused when she saw me. Just a flicker. A stutter step in her rhythm. Then came the smile. Tight. Professional. Like a press release on legs. Rachel, she said, gliding toward me, arms loose at her sides. I nodded. Amanda. A beat passed. She tilted her head, all faux warmth. I didn't think you'd be joining us. I smiled. Just enough to be unnerving. I noticed. Oh, bae. Another beat. She was calculating. Trying to decide if she could say something, anything, without looking petty. I gave her nothing. Instead, I looked past her at the guests who'd started watching. Women in satin wrap dresses. Men in quarter zips and navy shorts. And among them, a woman I didn't know. Maybe mid-40s. Maybe older. Elegant. Not overdressed. She held a flute of Prosecco and watched me like she was waiting for something interesting to start. I met her eyes for just a second. She raised her glass. Subtle. Like a nod you give someone who just said exactly what you were thinking without speaking. That was all I needed. Amanda took a breath. Well, you know how these things go. Small venue. Tight guest list. Logistics and all. Of course, I said. And yet, here we are. Silence. Then footsteps behind me. Dan. Late. Of course. He looked surprised to see me, then quickly masked it with a half smile. Rach, you made it. Oh. I didn't answer. Just let him feel that space. Amanda looked between us, searching for footing. But I didn't give it. Instead, I turned to one of the servers walking by with a tray of sparkling water and took a glass. I won't stay long, I said. Just wanted to pay my respects to the generations being toasted. Amanda opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She was a woman used to controlling rooms. And I had just rewritten the air. As I walked toward the back deck past the tables, the white tablecloths, the monogrammed napkins, I noticed something strange. People were watching me. Not whispering. Not gawking. Just noting. Like they'd seen something out of sync. A new center of gravity. I stood at the edge of the dock. Watched the water shimmer under the sun. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Presence. My own. Unmistakable. And in that moment, I realized. I hadn't needed an invitation. I was the event. I didn't expect to stay. After all that just showing up, claiming space, I thought I'd walk away. Let that moment echo in Amanda's perfect little world and leave it there. But then someone tapped me on the shoulder. Excuse me, are you Rachel Callahan? I turned. It was the woman from earlier. The one with the Prosecco. The quiet grace. The kind of woman who didn't ask questions she didn't already know the answer to. Yes, I said. She smiled, not wide, but real. I've heard about you. From Carolyn McAdams. She sits on the board with me at the Arts and Culture Foundation. My heart hiccuped. Caroline. She was the one who'd given me my first grant when I opened the gallery. A woman who believed in women who didn't come from legacies, who carved their names with their own hands. The woman in front of me extended her hand. I'm Laurel Winslow. I took it. Her grip was steady. Warm. Amanda never mentioned you, she said, and though the words were gentle, I felt the sting buried underneath. She usually doesn't, I replied, matching her tone. She gave a soft, knowing laugh. That's a shame. The way you just walked in here? That kind of presence can't be bought. I admire that. My breath caught. Not from flattery but recognition. It was the first time all evening someone saw me without squinting. Before I could respond, Laurel leaned in slightly. There's a seat open at my table. Join us? 1,000 instincts screamed. Say, no, don't push it, don't overstay. But something older, quieter nudged me forward. I nodded. We walked together past Amanda's circle. Her eyes tracked us, confusion rippling behind her practiced smile. For a moment, I could almost hear the math she was doing in her head. And then came the shift. I felt it. The whisper of energy as people began to notice. Me. Not in the background. Not as Dan's wife. Not as Amanda's outsider. As a person with gravity. Laurel's table was near the terrace. Not front and center but close enough that people watched. There were 6 others already seated. All older than me, all clearly important. I slid into the open chair and placed my napkin in my lap with hands I hoped looked steady. Laurel introduced me casually. No fanfare, just, this is Rachel. She's doing incredible work in the arts. No last name. No connections to Amanda or Dan. Just me. The conversation flowed easily. They asked about my gallery, about the downtown revitalization projects I'd consulted on. And for the first time in what felt like years, I got to speak about what I loved without filtering myself through family politics. But then, a shadow loomed. Amanda. She approached the table like someone who hadn't lost control, even though her knuckles around her wine glass told a different story. Laurel, I see you've met Rachel, she said, too light, too polished. I have, Laurel replied, smooth as silk. She's a gem. You must be proud to have her in the family. Amanda's smile twitched. Of course. She turned to me, and, for a split second, I saw it something soft, almost pleading. Would you mind stopping by our table before you go? She asked. Dad was asking about you. It was meant to be an olive branch. Or a performance. I couldn't quite tell. Either way, it surprised me. I nodded. Sure. She left without waiting for more. And I sat there, heart buzzing. Had I just been invited back in? Or was she trying to get ahead of the whispers? Laurel glanced at me, amused. That was interesting. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I touched the edge of my water glass, cool against my fingers. And remembered. A photo Dan and I had taken at our wedding. Me in a simple gown. Amanda off to the side, blurry, arms crossed. She hadn't wanted to be in the photo, said it wasn't her thing. I'd believed her. Now, I wondered if she just hadn't wanted to be outshone. By someone she thought didn't belong. I looked around the table. At the people asking me questions. Listening, laughing. And I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't here because I forced my way in. I was here because this was mine, too. The lights on the deck had dimmed just slightly, one of those automatic cues that signaled dessert and speeches were on their way. The lake breeze had cooled, brushing against my shoulders like the night was giving me a quiet nod. I hadn't moved from Laurel's table. And surprisingly, no one had asked me to. Across the deck, Amanda was circling. Laughing too brightly. Pouring too generously. Her charm had an edge to it now, like a silk dress worn one time too many. I was watching, but not really. Until I heard my name. She's honestly the most grounded person I've met all year. I turned slightly. It was one of Amanda's closest friends, Tessa, I think. The one who used to avoid eye contact with me at family dinners. She wasn't talking to me, she was talking about me. To another woman I didn't recognize. She ran an entire mentorship program for small-town girls who wanted to study the arts. Amanda never mentioned that, did she? A pause. Then a soft, almost conspiratorial laugh. She told us Rachel married up. My chest tightened. But not from hurt. From clarity. Because in that moment, I saw it how Amanda had crafted my image, piece by piece. Polite. Peripheral. Pleasant, at best. Disposable, at worst. But now? People were rewriting me. Without my permission. Without my effort. I took a sip of water and let the quiet satisfaction wash over me. Then I saw Dan. Standing awkwardly between two groups. Drink in hand, collar loose, face blank. He wasn't looking at me, but he wasn't avoiding me either. He was suspended. Like a man who knew he was supposed to choose, but kept hoping the wind would do it for him. And suddenly, I remembered a moment from 2 summers ago. We'd been on the smaller family boat, anchored just offshore. I had offered to help his mother with the hors d'oeuvres, even though Amanda had barked that I didn't need to. I'd done it anyway. Quietly. Carefully. Afterwards, Dan had said, "It's easier when you don't push her." I had nodded. Told myself that love was about keeping the peace. But now, watching him from across the deck, I realized I wasn't the one pushing. I had just stopped retreating. Amanda made her way over to him. Whispered something. His jaw tensed. And then for the first time all night looked straight at me. Our eyes locked. Just a flicker. Then he looked away. It was a small moment. But it gutted me. Because I realized he wasn't embarrassed of me. He was embarrassed by me. Because I was no longer following the silent script. At Laurel's table, someone asked me about a piece I'd curated in Detroit. I answered automatically, but my mind was elsewhere, looping that glance from Dan. It hurt in a quiet way. Like peeling off a bandage you didn't know was stuck to skin. A server appeared with small plates of tiramisu. I barely touched mine. Across the deck, Amanda clinked a spoon against her glass. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice sweetened with polish. "It means so much to have friends and family who make tradition something to look forward to every year." A few heads turned toward me. She went on, thanking her husband, the crew, the caterers. Everyone but Dan, curiously. And certainly not me. But I didn't flinch. I glanced down at my dessert, and there it was, sliced perfectly, dusted with cocoa. It looked exactly like the one I made for Dan on our 2nd anniversary. The one Amanda had tasted and said, "It's cute you cook." I didn't even blink now. The past was still in me. But it didn't define me. When the toast ended, people clapped. Some genuinely. Some out of habit. And then Tessa walked over. She didn't smile. She just said, "Hey, I owe you an apology." I raised an eyebrow. For what? For not knowing better. And for letting her shape the story. Oh, I didn't know what to say. So I nodded. Quietly. Then I stood. I wasn't sure if I was leaving or just stretching. But in that moment, my body felt mine again. Tall. Balanced. Amanda was watching me. So I smiled. And for once, I didn't care who she became when I did. The music had softened. People were starting to trickle off the deck in 2s and 3s, laughing quietly, heels clicking against teakwood. The kind of laughter that only shows up after wine and social currency have run their course. I stayed. Not because I had to, but because, for the first time, I didn't feel like an imposter. Laurel was still beside me, her hand loosely curled around a champagne flute she hadn't touched in over an hour. She glanced sideways, then leaned in just slightly. "You'll be back next year," she said. "I'll make sure of it." He blinked. She didn't say it like a favor, she said it like fact. There was no big applause. No spotlight. Just a quiet sentence that felt louder than any toast Amanda had given all night. I nodded slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. Laurel smiled. It's long overdue. The moment wrapped around me like a coat I hadn't realized I'd needed. Not flashy, just warm. Real. That's when I noticed Amanda standing a few feet away, still in heels, but her posture had changed. The bounce in her step was gone. Her smile was thin. Forced. She looked tired. Or maybe exposed. She was talking to two of the younger wives-women she used to practically choreograph like backup dancers. But they weren't responding the same way. They weren't nodding as much. One was checking her phone. Amanda caught my eye. For a moment, I expected the usual her smirk, her raised eyebrow, the performance of superiority. But this time, all she did was look. And something inside her flickered. Like a light dimming in a hallway you once ran through barefoot as a kid. I thought I'd feel triumphant. But I didn't. All I felt was distance. A canyon that had been widening for years, and now, finally, I could see the other side without needing to cross. I looked away. At the edge of the deck, Dan was leaning against the railing, one hand on a Scotch glass that looked more like a prop than comfort. He hadn't approached me all night. Not really. Just glances, half-steps, aborted moments. But now, he moved. Crossed the space between us, like it was casual. Like we were still us. He stopped a few feet short, eyes soft. You look good tonight. I gave a quiet smile. Thanks. Pause. I didn't know Amanda left you off the list this year. She told me you didn't want to come. There it was. The rewrite. The soft gaslight. She told you that? He nodded, sheepish. I let the silence hang. Let him feel it. You believed her, I said. No anger, just fact. He looked down at the deck boards like they might offer a defense. I don't know what to say, he mumbled. That says plenty, I replied. Dan looked up. I didn't mean for things to go this far. I thought if I kept the peace. You kept her peace, I said gently. Not mine. He winced. Just slightly. I glanced past him toward the railing. There, fluttering slightly in the night air, was the small table card with Amanda's name. Half-bent. Forgotten. Funny how symbols show up when you're not looking. Dan reached out, but not for my hand, just a gesture, like he wanted to say more. Instead, I stepped back. I'm not angry, I told him. I see things differently now. He swallowed. Are you leaving? In a bit, I said. But I didn't mean the boat. I meant us. And I think he knew. I turned and walked back toward Laurel. As I passed Amanda's table, she stiffened just barely but enough. She didn't speak. And I didn't need her to. When I reached Laurel again, she was gathering her shawl. You've changed, she said simply. I looked at her. Is that good or bad? She laughed softly. It's earned. Just before we left the deck, I glanced back once more. The lights were still warm. The night still calm. But everything had shifted. And not one single person had to say my name out loud for me to feel it. I had arrived. Finally, on my own terms. The sun was barely cresting the horizon when I stepped onto the deck for the last time. Soft gold light spilled over the lake, painting everything in a kind of hush. No laughter, no music, no heels clacking on teak. Just the water, the wind, and me. I held my coffee close, fingers wrapped around the mug like an anchor. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't ache anymore. Behind me, inside the cabin, I could still hear the low shuffle of bags being packed. Someone's suitcase wheel dragging across the carpet. A muffled door shutting. I wasn't rushing. I didn't need to. That was the difference now. For years, I had moved around this space like a guest on probation. Careful not to take up too much room. Careful not to show how much I noticed the glances, the exclusions, the way Amanda had curated this world to be hers. But that morning, the boat didn't feel like hers anymore. It didn't even feel like theirs. It felt like a stage I had stepped off oftenly. My duffel bag sat beside me, zipped and ready. Not stuffed, Not frantic, just enough. I turned at the sound of footsteps. Amanda. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair was still damp from a rush shower. For once, no one was orbiting her. No laughter following her like perfume. She paused when she saw me, surprised, maybe, that I was already out here. I gave her a nod. Not petty, not cold. Just a nod. She hesitated like she was waiting for me to speak first. I didn't. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder, looked past me toward the lake. Then she walked by. No final word. No dig, no apology. And oddly, that felt right. Closure, I've learned, isn't always a door that slams. Sometimes, it's just one you stop trying to open. I boarded the shuttle back to shore alone. No Dan. No Amanda. Just me and a sunrise that looked a lot like freedom. By noon, I was home. The scent of my own sheets, the quiet hum of the fridge, the way the sunlight landed on the hallway rug, I hadn't realized how much I missed it. I brewed tea. Opened the windows. Let myself breathe. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Laurel. Next year, you're picking the playlist. I mean it. I smiled. I didn't need permission anymore. But it still meant something to be seen. A few minutes after that, another notification came in. A tag on social media. One of Amanda's friends, Jessica, the one with the startup I'd helped advise last fall, had posted a photo of the group from Yacht Week. In the caption, she'd written, "Every group has someone who brings calm, clarity, and quiet strength. Ours is Rachel." I stared at the screen for a second too long. Not because I needed validation, but because I wasn't used to being described that way. And maybe it had always been there, just buried beneath years of trying to fit into a frame someone else painted. I opened my laptop and clicked into my work dashboard. A new influx of subscribers. A few emails from women I'd met at conferences. Invitations. Collabs. Apparently, while I'd been off fighting invisible battles on a boat, my real life had been waiting unbothered, intact, even blooming. The next morning, I walked to the coffee shop down the street. No makeup, messy bun, just me. The barista remembered my order. Someone behind me tapped my shoulder. "Rachel, right? You taught that branding workshop last spring?" I turned. It was a young woman, early 20s, eyes bright with recognition. "I still use what you taught," she said. "Changed everything for me." And just like that, the yacht, the exclusion, Amanda, Dan. It all felt like a chapter I'd finished reading. Not ripped out. Not forgotten. Just finished. And I was ready to write the next one. On my terms. In my name. Without needing anyone's permission to belong.